So I finally did it. I shot some wet plates. This project was supported by CENDANA. So today I'll be talking you through my experience making these. These are what's known as ambrotypes, or more commonly referred to as wet plates. The ambrotype process refers to the fact that it's a collodion image on glass. So that's an ambrotype, while you might have heard the term ferrotype or tintype, and those are the same image process but on a metal plate. So not many people are familiar with this process today, but may be familiar with the way it looks and the kind of imagery you associate with a lot of older photos. And that is because the process originated in about 1850, and it was one of the first more popular photographic processes that photographers would use. And so this was before the invention of consumer film. You couldn't just buy a wet plate from a store, stick it in your camera, and sort of be on your way. You had to be sort of as much a chemist as a photographer. Today, obviously, it's considered a bit of an outdated process, and most people who use it are using it as sort of a study or to understand alternative processes, or like more as an art form. There are even less practitioners in Malaysia, I would say, compared to anywhere around the world, especially places like the US, Australia, that kind of thing, because it's a little bit difficult to get the chemicals required for the process itself. You have to apply for permits, you have to obtain a license to obtain these chemicals and sort of use them on a day-to-day basis, and that's made it a little bit more inaccessible to those like me who just kind of want to learn the process. So that's made it a bit of a difficult journey to sort of start. But thanks to the support of CENDANA, I was able to visit Steve, who is a wet plate practitioner in Ipoh, and he was able to help me sort of guide me through the process and show me how wet plates are made. And before we get to the video, I just wanted to say that I plan to upload a little bit more frequently. It's been a little bit busy the past few months because I've been part of a residency with House. I've also had this sort of project grant going on for a while, and trying to organize a way to get to Ipoh during interstate lockdown has been a little bit challenging, but we got there in the end. If you like this kind of videos and this kind of content talking about analog processes, I plan to do quite a bit more in the coming months and weeks. So do stick around for that. If you'd like to support the channel, I have Ko-fi, a site that you can leave tips, donate, buy me more coffee. I've also got a new camera that I've built. Hopefully you guys will be able to see that in a little while. But in the meantime, I guess this is my experience shooting wet plates. So as we left for Ipoh in the morning, it was not the best weather. It was pretty rainy and cloudy, and it was a bit concerning because that's kind of the not good weather for wet plates. And so we got there a bit early, ended up having some dim sum, walked around town a little bit, and eventually sort of just hung about until Steve showed up. And I talked to Steve quite a lot online. He's a super nice guy, super willing to share his knowledge and spread the love of wet plates, and we got to chatting quite a lot. He was telling me a lot about his struggles sort of formulating wet plate formulas. For Malaysia, it tends to get really humid and really tropical and hot here, so that is not something that is ideal for wet plates, but through his trial and error, he's sort of created a really stable collodion mixture, and it's pretty impressive sort of the detail he manages to get out of his mix. After that, we set up the camera. He's using this beautiful old, I think it's an 8x10, it might be a little bit bigger. set up the workspace, everything is pretty quick once you actually have your wet plate poured. So the reason it's actually called a wet plate is because the whole process happens when the plate is still wet. It's essentially a big mix of a few different salts diluted in ether and alcohol, sensitized in a silver nitrate bath. The silver and everything is only sensitive to light when it's still moist. Especially in Malaysia, because it's pretty hot, things tend to dry out really fast. So Steve's mixture has been pretty good in that it's sort of beginner friendly. You can kind of take your time with it, but your exposure from pouring the plate to making your exposure to developing, it all has to kind of happen within about 10 minutes, otherwise the plate dries out. So you need to have all your equipment ready to go, and that's what we were doing here. So we ended up setting up the workspace. So the first step of the process in making an amber type is obviously getting your glass cut. Steve already pre-cut the glass to a 5x7 format. Just to make sure you don't get cuts and everything, you gotta sand off the edges of the glass, and then next make sure the glass is completely clean, otherwise the collodion mix won't stick well to it. Silver nitrate is a little bit hazardous because it can stain your hands. That's not the worst part, but if you're not careful and you get it in your eyes, you can actually go blind. So we were really careful around that stuff. I actually got a little bit on my skin. I'm not sure how it got halfway down my arm, but the stain has been there for like a week now, and it's not faded. So yeah, I mean, if you get that on your hands and your face, it's a bit dangerous, so gloves are always important. After that, we actually have to set up the camera beforehand and make your framing and everything perfect before you actually pour your plate. Otherwise, that cuts into the time it takes to actually make the plate. So after that, Steve was running me through how to develop it. We actually use a very, very little amount of developer because it's more economical that way. And the goal is to sort of keep the developer on the plate as much as you can. If you were to develop it the same way you would a darkroom paper, it would sort of dilute the silver on the plate too much and you wouldn't get a very great image. The next part of the process is a pretty critical one if you're aiming for a super clean image. Pouring the collodion onto the plate is a little bit of a tricky process and something I feel like a lot of first-time wet platers would mess up. I messed mine up a little bit as well. Essentially, you want to create a very even coating of collodion across the plate, and it's a little bit difficult because obviously the collodion is pretty viscous, and when you try and persuade it to all four corners to make an even coating, it might slip off the sides, or you might not sort of coat it very evenly. You might get small holes like I did in my first plate. But that's all sort of part of the learning process. As you get more familiar with the consistency of the collodion, it'll probably be a lot easier. After that, we put the whole plate in a bath of silver nitrate. So after it's been in the bath for about 4 minutes, we take it out and you can see that the plate has become this milky color. After that, we put it back into the holder and we run outside, make our exposure. In this case, the light had died down a little bit. The thing with collodion is that you can't really use a light meter because a light meter measures across all visible light. So if you were using a normal camera with maybe normal film, it would be a more accurate reading, but collodion tends to lean more towards sensitivity toward UV light. And that's not something that a normal light meter can actually measure. So a lot of it is based on experience, based on what you know your collodion mixture can handle. So in this case, Steve was guiding me into telling me how long to expose my plates for. So after that, we took our plate back out and you can see I'm pouring the developer sort of in one quick go, but trying to keep as much developer on the plate as I can. shake it around a little bit, make sure it gets to all the little bits and pieces, and you can actually already see a bit of an image pop up. So that was the exposed areas of the collodion mixture. As a stop bath, we just wash it off in water, get the rest of the developer off the plate, and then we go to the fixer, and that's kind of where the magic of collodion kind of happens. You get this pretty magical sort of reveal of your image in the tray, and I think that was my favorite part of it. I was so captivated by the way it kind of reveals itself, and yeah, it's a really beautiful process. It was really fun. Something I would definitely and hope to actually do again soon. So after that, we just rinse off the rest of the fixer, make sure we clean the underneath of the tray as well, because we don't want the fixer to stay and leave any sort of staining. So after that, we put it outside to dry. Having a look at it out in the sun, it was pretty beautiful. So yeah, I was really eager to make my second plate right after that. So once it's dry, the way we black out the back of it is by adding a varnish. And that is sort of twofold in this case, where it protects the layer of collodion from flaking off or sort of degrading after a while. And then Steve also mixes a little bit of bitumen in with it, which creates sort of a blackout layer, so that you don't have to go over the top of it and paint it again. It's just sort of one process. After that, we just went out, let it dry in the sun. The varnish itself takes quite a while to dry because it's pretty humid in Malaysia, so that took a while. And while that was drying, I set up for my second shot. I was really captivated by how beautiful the building that Steve works in is. It's this old sort of townhouse Ipoh building, but it's been kind of half taken over by plants, and yeah, it was a really beautiful space, and I wanted to sort of capture that. So yeah, we went back into the dark room, poured my second plate. This time I did, I would like to think, a lot better than my first one. There were no real sort of spots that were empty or anything, so. So the shot had already been set up. We came outside, and I think this exposure was for about 3 seconds. You just have to kind of time it by hand. After that, we went back into the darkroom to develop it. And this time I was familiar with the developing process and how to pour it, so my second plate was a lot smoother than the first. So the exposure on my second plate was a lot better, mainly because the first time around the sun had sort of shifted after we'd taken our initial exposure reading, I guess. And this time it was a lot more sort of consistent all the way through. I was really, really impressed by the amount of detail that the collodion was able to capture. There's a lot of assumption that because it's a really old process or because it's a really sort of dated thing, that all your images are going to be kind of blurry or faded or something like that, but evident in the plate that I shot and some of the other stuff that Steve has shot, and he showed me that you can get some really beautiful detail. So after that, I'd coated the second plate, and just to speed up the drying process and to make it coat a little bit even, put it over a little oil lamp to heat it up, and that sort of made the process a little bit quicker. So yeah, that was the process. I really enjoyed myself, and I think I came away with one of my favorite images just because of what it represents to me. I've been wanting to do wet plates for a really long time, and actually being able to do it is something really special. And to have, you know, a piece of glass that I shot myself, it's really cool. So I'm gonna get this framed up, probably put it somewhere in the studio. Yeah, I'll leave you with some images of some scans so you can actually see the amount of detail that comes out of this guy, which is pretty surprising. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a really great experience, and I really hope to be able to shoot more wet plates in the future. Like I said, I've got more darkroom videos and more film related camera building videos coming soon, so hope to see you guys around. Follow me on Instagram. Everything will be down in the description. Thanks again to CENDANA for making this all possible. It was a bit of a struggle with the interstate restrictions and everything, but hey, we got some pretty good looking wet plates in the end. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.